My genuine memory of my first experiences with wine were around 4 or 5. At that time, I was visiting my grandparents, and there was a vineyard that they had established. Of course, there was always wine on the table, and there's always a carafe, and it was just right out of the barrel all the time. And at 5, they were giving me a little bit of wine mixed with water. That was the standard. And I remember the winemaking process early on and seeing them pressing out the juice and the fermentation and all that. And I was just very curious at the time. Little did I know what impact that was to have for me. So when I was about 20, my wife, Nancy, and I were in a little apartment, and there was a row of grapes of different colors along the fence line. I asked the old guy, who was a Seventh-day Adventist, if I could have some of the grapes on my side of the fence. And he, well, what do you want to do with them? I says, oh, we're going to make some jam. He goes, oh, sure, take some. I made, probably 5 gallons off of this. Well, it was very cloudy, and I thought undrinkable. I let my brothers have it, and they drank it all. So that was my first venture into winemaking. So I made wine pretty intensively for about 8 years as a home winemaker. And so I made all my mistakes on those early wines. I was in the reserves. A good friend of mine, Rick Small, who has Woodward Canyon Winery, he and I would go off to places in the United States for training and to train others. And so while we were in California, of course, we hit the wine trail and every tasting room we could find, and we're always going off and tasting wines and whatnot. It became kind of a fascination. We're learning so much and jamming so much in the whole wine world, just like sponges, just taking it all in. This whole wine thing became quite serious, I would say the mid to late 70s, when I was making some pretty good homemade wines. Met a friend over in the Columbia Basin, Tri-Cities area. He had a vineyard. We struck a deal. Hey, let's make a little wine off your vineyard and we'll share the wine. And he goes, great, let's do it. So in 75, we started making some vinifera. We made Cabernet. Right away was just really good. I learned so much making homemade wine and reading all the regions of the world, packing all my library and just vociferously pouring over all these books. That was kind of the beginning. We became Bonner Winery number 67 in 1977, and we were the first winery in Walla Walla. Everybody thought it was a funny thing. There wasn't really a wine culture here. A lot of the old Italians died off, and along with that, any little small postage stamp vineyards that were around, and nobody was really making wine except for maybe just a couple crazy guys like me making homemade wine. I chose the name Leonetti because of my influence and my time spent out at the family farm as a youth. The name Leonetti had some cachet. I think people really responded to it, and it was bona fide too. My mother was a Leonetti. I had no idea that I had the entrepreneurial spirit until I started planting that seed from my early successes with red wines, especially vinifera. It just was fermenting in my mind and in my heart. The biggest challenge was, how am I going to tell Nancy I wouldn't mind making a little wine to sell? That was quite a challenge to get over that hump. And I finally just said, okay, here's what I'd like to do. Wouldn't it be fun if we could make a little money to put the kids through college? I had no idea we were going to be as wildly successful as we became. The economics of getting into making wine for us was so basically primitive, and we had zero money. We were raising 2 kids, and I had a day job in a factory as a laborer, and gradually worked up and became a machinist in that same factory, and worked with my dad, who was a tool and die maker there. Everything that we did within that initial startup phase, thinking we wanted to do this, was all just handmade stuff, just whatever we could pick up. I found some old stainless steel pickling vats out of the local cannery and was able to get those for a song. And I built some pump stands and bought this little magnetic drive pump, and everything very, very simple and cheap. Here's some crazy young guy thinks he wants to make a few bucks doing this when nobody else around is doing it in our valley. We made our first wine, our 1978 Cabernet, and it was a blend of my friend's vineyard in the Tri-Cities area and grapes that we had planted in 74. It was stunning. We were just amazed how good it was. At one time, the Wine and Spirits magazine, they were going to do a judging and figure out what's the best wine in the nation. And we thought, oh gosh, do we really want to send off a couple bottles? They wanted a couple bottles. What the heck? And so we sent them off anyway and forgot about it. And then it was, a couple months later, my wife calls me at work. I go, hey, honey, what's going on? She says, honey, you're not going to believe this. Even today, I get the upwellings because that was such a time, that was such an incredible emotional lift. It launched us. God, you won this thing, your best cab in the nation. I think that anybody who is very passionate about wine starts in this business. They all want and need that big boost. It's such a wonderful thing to get that, to launch a new brand.